In the early 19th century, as European thrones rose and fell under Napoleon's shadow, one German princess quietly shaped the future of royalty across the continent. Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, best known today as the mother of Queen Victoria, had 3 children whose lives spanned small German courts, the early British monarchy, and the liberal upheavals of Europe. One became a German prince navigating revolutions, one married into a mediatized house and linked generations of modern royals, and one would become one of the most influential monarchs in world history. This is the clear chronological account of what happened to Princess Victoria's children, Karl, Feodora, and Alexandrina Victoria, their births, their upbringing, their marriages, their careers, their descendants, and the legacy each left behind. No myth, no drama, only the factual, documented record of how 3 siblings helped shape the royal families of Europe. Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld was born in 1786 into a minor German princely house. At 17, she married Amish Karl, second Prince of Leiningen, a widower with 3 children. The marriage brought her to Ammerbach, a modest principality in Franconia that had been reorganized during the Napoleonic redistribution of German territories. Between 1804 and 1819, Princess Victoria bore 3 children who would follow remarkably different paths. Her first child, Karl, was born into the Leiningen succession. Her second, Feodora, grew up in the transitional years after Napoleon's defeat. Her third, Alexandrina Victoria, entered the world as a potential heir to the British throne. Each child's life reflected the changing political landscape of 19th century Europe, from the fragmented German states to the expanding influence of the British monarchy. This documentary follows each child chronologically, from birth to death, examining their roles, their marriages, their descendants, and the legacies they left behind. The story begins with Karl, the eldest, who inherited a small German principality and briefly stood at the center of revolutionary politics. Karl Friedrich Wilhelm Amick was born on September 12, 1804, at Ammerbach, the principal residence of the Leiningen family. His birth secured the succession of the Leiningen line through his mother's marriage to Prince Amish Karl. At the time of Karl's birth, the German states were undergoing dramatic reorganization. The Holy Roman Empire was collapsing under pressure from Napoleon, and smaller principalities like Leiningen were being mediatized, absorbed into larger states while retaining nominal titles and certain privileges. The Leiningen Principality itself had been reformed in 1803 through the secularization of ecclesiastical territories. Ammerbach, once an abbey, had become the family's main residence. Karl's birth represented continuity for a house adapting to the new political order. His father ruled a territory that, while small, maintained its own administration and court structure within the framework of the emerging German Confederation. Karl's early years were spent in the palace at Ammerbach, a Baroque building that had been converted from its monastic origins. The court was modest by European standards, maintaining traditional ceremonial functions while managing the practical administration of estates and local governance. Karl grew up surrounded by the formalities of German princely life, tutors, court officials, and the routines of a small ruling house. His mother managed household affairs and participated in the social life of the minor German nobility. His father oversaw the principality's administration, dealing with questions of taxation, justice, and relations with neighboring territories. Karl had 3 older half-siblings from his father's first marriage, as well as a younger sister, Feodora, born in 1807. The household maintained connections with other German princely families through marriage alliances and diplomatic correspondence. On July 4, 1814, Prince Amish Karl died at Ammerbach. Karl was 9 years old. Under the laws governing princely succession in the German states, Karl inherited his father's title and became the 3rd Prince of Leiningen. However, given his age, he could not assume active governance. His mother, Princess Victoria, was appointed regent and took responsibility for administering the principality until Karl reached his majority. The transition occurred during a period of political reorganization following Napoleon's defeat. The Congress of Vienna was reshaping the map of Europe, and the German states were being organized into a new confederation. The Leiningen Principality, though mediatized, retained certain rights and privileges that required careful management. Princess Victoria's regency placed her in a complex political position, balancing the interests of her son's inheritance with the broader shifts in German governance. As regent, Princess Victoria took on administrative responsibilities that required both political acumen and practical management skills. She oversaw the principality's finances, maintained relations with neighboring states, and ensured the continuation of local governance structures. The regency also required her to navigate the legal and political implications of mediatization, maintaining Leiningen's status while accepting its integration into larger administrative frameworks. The principality faced financial pressures common to small German territories in this period. Agricultural revenues, estate management, and traditional feudal obligations formed the economic base, but these were increasingly strained by modernizing pressures and changing legal structures. Princess Victoria worked with advisors and court officials in Innsbruck to maintain stability during Karl's minority. Her regency demonstrated the active role women could play in German princely governance when circumstances required it. Karl received the education typical of a German prince destined to rule. Private tutors instructed him in languages, history, law, and administration. His curriculum emphasized the practical skills needed for governance, understanding legal codes, managing estates, and conducting diplomatic correspondence. He also studied classical subjects and received training in military matters, though Leiningen's small size limited the scope of actual military activity. His education reflected the transitional nature of German politics in the post-Napoleonic period. Traditional princely training was being supplemented with newer ideas about constitutional governance and administrative reform. Karl's tutors exposed him to Enlightenment political philosophy and contemporary debates about the organization of German states. This education prepared him not only to manage his inherited principality, but also to participate in the broader political discussions reshaping Germany. In 1818, Princess Victoria made a decision that would significantly affect her family's future. She accepted a marriage proposal from Edward, Duke of Kent, the fourth son of King George III of Britain. The marriage was arranged partly to secure the British royal succession. The Duke of Kent had no legitimate children, and the line of succession was uncertain. For Princess Victoria, the marriage represented financial security and elevated social status, but it also meant leaving Amerbach and relocating to Britain. Karl remained in Germany, continuing his education and preparing to assume his princely duties. His mother's remarriage created new connections between the Leiningen family and the British royal house. These connections would become increasingly important as Karl's half-sister, born in 1819, grew closer to inheriting the British throne. Karl maintained regular correspondence with his mother and visited Britain periodically, but his primary focus remained on his German inheritance and responsibilities. Karl attended the University of Göttingen, one of the leading academic institutions in the German states. The university was known for its progressive approach to legal and political studies, and Karl studied law and administrative science. His time at Göttingen exposed him to contemporary debates about constitutional government, civil law reform, and the future organization of the German states. The university environment brought Karl into contact with other young German nobles and intellectuals who were discussing political reform. The 1820s and 1830s were periods of growing tension between traditional monarchical authority and demands for constitutional limits on royal power. Karl's education at Göttingen positioned him within the more liberal wing of German princely politics, favoring gradual reform and constitutional frameworks over absolute rule. Karl came of age and assumed full control of his principality in the mid-1820s. He took over the administrative responsibilities his mother had managed during the Regency and began implementing his own approach to governance. His rule focused on maintaining Leiningen's traditional privileges while adapting to the changing legal and political environment of the German Confederation. He managed the principality's estates, oversaw local justice, and maintained the ceremonial functions of the princely court. Leiningen was now fully integrated into the administrative structures of larger German states, particularly Bavaria, but Karl retained titles and certain jurisdictional rights. His governance was characterized by attention to legal reform and administrative efficiency, reflecting his education and political inclinations. He participated in the networks of minor German nobility, maintaining family connections and diplomatic relations with neighboring houses. The year 1848 brought revolutionary upheaval across Europe, and Germany experienced widespread demands for constitutional reform and national unification. Karl became directly involved in these events when he was elected to the Frankfurt Parliament. An assembly convened to draft a constitution for a unified German state. His political experience and moderate liberal views made him a notable figure within the Parliament's deliberations. In December 1848, Karl was appointed the first Prime Minister of the Provisional Central Government, the executive body created by the Frankfurt Parliament. He served as head of this government during a critical and unstable period. The government lacked real power, facing resistance from the major German states, particularly Prussia and Austria, which were unwilling to cede authority to a central administration. Karl attempted to navigate these tensions, but the political situation proved untenable. He resigned from his position in May 1849 as the revolutionary movement collapsed and conservative forces reasserted control. The Frankfurt Parliament ultimately failed to achieve German unification, and Karl returned to his principality. His brief tenure at the center of German revolutionary politics demonstrated both his political principles and the practical limitations facing liberal reformers in mid-19th century Germany. Karl married Countess Maria von Klebelsberg on February 19, 1829. Maria came from an Austrian noble family and brought additional continental connections to the Leiningen house. The marriage produced two sons who would continue the Leiningen line and maintain the family's position within German nobility. Their first son, Ernst Leopold Victor Karl August Joseph Emer, was born on November 9, 1830. Ernst became the fourth Prince of Leiningen upon Karl's death and continued the family's administration of their estates and titles. Ernst married Princess Marie of Baden, further connecting the Leiningen family to the major German royal houses. He maintained the family's position through the political changes of the late 19th century. Their second son, Eduard Friedrich Franz Joseph, was born on September 27, 1833. Eduard did not inherit the princely title but maintained his position as a prince of the Leiningen house. Both sons were educated according to their station and participated in the social and political networks of German nobility. Through Ernst's descendants, the Leiningen line continued into the 20th and 21st centuries, maintaining its historical connection to both German and British royal families. Karl's later years were marked by declining health and reduced political activity. He suffered a stroke and died on November 13, 1856, at Amorbach, the same palace where he had been born 52 years earlier. He was buried in the family crypt, and his son Ernst succeeded him as the fourth Prince of Leiningen. Karl's legacy extends in several directions. Within German history, he is remembered for his brief but significant role in the 1848 revolutions as the first Prime Minister of the Provisional Central Government. His participation in the Frankfurt Parliament placed him at the center of the failed attempt to create a unified constitutional German state. He also played a role in the Texas Adelsverein, a German colonization project in Texas, serving as one of its founding members and helping to organize German emigration to North America. His relationship with his half-sister, Queen Victoria, remained cordial throughout his life. She referred to him affectionately as her dear brother and maintained correspondence with him. Through his descendants, the Leiningen family remained connected to European nobility, including ongoing relationships with the British royal family. The current Leiningen line traces directly back to Karl through his son Ernst. His life exemplified the experience of minor German princes in the 19th and the 19th century, maintaining traditional positions while navigating revolutionary political changes. Anna Feodora August Charlotte Wilhelmine was born on December 7, 1807, at Amorbach. She was the second child of Princess Victoria and Prince Emich Karl of Leiningen, and the younger sister of Karl. Her birth occurred during a period of relative stability for the Leiningen family, though the broader German political landscape continued to shift in the aftermath of the Napoleonic reorganization. Feodora's position differed from her brothers. Karl would inherit the principality, while Feodora's future would be determined through marriage. This was the standard pattern for princesses in German noble houses, where daughters served to create alliances through strategic matches with other families. Feodora's early years at Amerbach followed the typical patterns of aristocratic childhood in a small German court. When Feodora was 6 years old, her father died, and her mother became regent for her brother Karl. Feodora's childhood was shaped by this period of female governance at Amerbach. She was educated alongside her brother, though with a curriculum more focused on languages, arts, and the social skills expected of a German princess. The household maintained traditional court structures while adapting to the post-Napoleonic political order. Feodora developed a close bond with both her mother and her brother during these years. The small scale of the Leiningen court meant that the family maintained intimate daily contact, unlike the more formal arrangements of larger royal houses. She received instruction in French, English, and German, as well as music, drawing, and religious education. Her upbringing prepared her for eventual marriage into another German noble family. The year 1818 brought dramatic change to Feodora's life when her mother accepted a marriage proposal from the Duke of Kent. Princess Victoria remarried in July 1818 and moved to Britain, taking Feodora with her. Feodora was 10 years old. The relocation meant leaving Amorbach, her brother, and the familiar world of German court life for the very different environment of the British royal family. The move was arranged in part to provide companionship for the Duchess of Kent, as the Duke of Kent's siblings and their social circles could be politically complex. Feodora's presence also served to demonstrate the Duchess's maternal capabilities, which had political significance given that the Duchess was now positioned to produce an heir to the British throne. In May 1819, the Duchess gave birth to a daughter, Alexandrina Victoria, who immediately became fifth in line to the throne. Feodora now had a half-sister whose political importance far exceeded anything she had previously experienced. Following the Duke of Kent's death in January 1820, the Duchess of Kent and her daughters settled at Kensington Palace. Feodora spent her teenage years in this environment, living in apartments within the palace, while the Duchess managed the household and supervised the upbringing of Princess Victoria. The household was relatively isolated from the broader British royal family due to tensions between the Duchess and King William IV. Feodora's daily life consisted of lessons, walks in Kensington Gardens, and limited social activities. The Duchess maintained tight control over the household, implementing what would later be called the Kensington system, a structured approach to Victoria's upbringing that also affected Feodora. Feodora had more freedom than her younger half-sister, but still lived under significant restrictions. She had few opportunities to interact with young people her own age or to participate in the social activities typical of aristocratic teenagers. Feodora served as an older sister and companion to Victoria, who was 12 years younger. In Victoria's early childhood, Feodora was her primary companion, close to her own age. They shared a bedroom, spent days together, and developed a close emotional bond. Feodora helped care for Victoria and participated in her lessons and daily routines. This relationship was significant for both sisters. For Victoria, Feodora represented a connection to family life beyond the formal strictures of the household. For Feodora, Victoria was her half-sister and a child she helped raise. Their bond would continue through correspondence after Feodora's marriage, with Victoria expressing deep affection for her older sister throughout her life. Feodora's position as Victoria's companion also meant she witnessed the early development of the future queen's personality and the household dynamics that shaped Victoria's childhood. As Feodora reached marriageable age in the mid-1820s, the Duchess of Kent began seeking an appropriate match. The search was complicated by several factors. Feodora was a German princess by birth but had no significant dowry. She lived in Britain but was not British. Her connection to the British royal family through her half-sister was valuable, but Victoria's succession was not yet certain. Queen Adelaide, wife of King William IV, took an interest in helping arrange Feodora's marriage. Adelaide had German origins herself and understood the importance of finding a suitable match that would be acceptable both to the Duchess and to German noble families. The search focused on German princes who could provide appropriate status without requiring an impossible dowry. Eventually, a match was proposed with Ernst Christian Karl, Prince of Hohenlohe-Langenburg. Feodora married Prince Ernst of Hohenlohe-Langenburg on February 18, 1828 at Kensington Palace. The wedding was attended by members of the British royal family, including King George IV, marking official recognition of the match. Ernst was a German prince whose family held mediatized status. They had once ruled independently, but were now integrated into larger states while retaining noble privileges and titles. After the wedding, Feodora left Britain and moved to Langenburg, a small town in what is now Baden-Württemberg. The Hohenlohe-Langenburg residence was a castle that served as both family home and administrative center for their estates. Feodora's transition from Kensington Palace to Langenburg meant adapting to life as a princess in a mediatized German house, a significant shift from the royal environment in Britain, but also a return to the scale and style of German noble life she had known at Amorbach. At Langenburg, Feodora took on the responsibilities of a German princess consort. These included managing household affairs, participating in local social and charitable activities, and representing the family at ceremonial functions. The Hohenlohe-Langenburg family maintained traditional court structures on a modest scale, overseeing their estates and maintaining relationships with other German noble houses. Feodora's position as princess involved both domestic responsibilities and public representation. She oversaw household staff, managed social obligations, and participated in the rituals of German noble life. The castle at Langenburg served as the center of these activities, and Feodora adapted to her role as the wife of a mediatized prince. Her life combined elements of domesticity, raising children and managing a large household, with the ceremonial and social obligations of her rank. Feodora and Ernst had 6 children, establishing a substantial family line that would connect to numerous European royal houses. Their children were Prince Karl Ludwig, born in 1829, who succeeded his father as the 5th Prince of Hohenlohe-Langenburg. He married Countess Marie zu Solms-Lich and continued the main line of the family. Princess Elise, born in 1830, who died in infancy, a common tragedy in 19th century aristocratic families. Prince Hermann Ernst, born in 1832, who pursued a military career and married his first cousin, Princess Leopoldine of Baden. Prince Victor, born in 1833, who entered British naval service and later became an admiral, maintaining the family's connection to Britain. Princess Adelheid, born in 1835, who married Duke Friedrich VIII of Schleswig-Holstein, connecting the Hohenlohe-Langenburg line to the Danish royal sphere and the complex Schleswig-Holstein succession questions. Prince Feodora, born in 1838, who also pursued a military career and married Princess Carolina zu Hohenlohe-Langenburg. Through these children, particularly through Adelheid's marriage into the Schleswig-Holstein line, Feodora's descendants spread through European nobility. Adelheid's children included Augusta Victoria, who became German empress as the wife of Kaiser Wilhelm II, making Feodora the great-grandmother of the last German emperor. Her descendants also connected to the Greek, Romanian, and Spanish royal families through subsequent marriages. The Hohenlohe-Langenburg line continues today, maintaining its historical position within German nobility and its genealogical connections to European royal houses. Despite the distance between Langenburg and Britain, Feodora maintained close contact with her half-sister Victoria throughout their lives. After Victoria became queen in 1837, the sisters continued to correspond regularly. Feodora made several visits to Britain, staying at Windsor and other royal residences. Victoria visited Langenburg as well, particularly during her travels in Germany. Their correspondence reveals a warm and affectionate relationship. Victoria referred to Feodora as her beloved sister and sought her advice on various matters, particularly in Victoria's early years as queen. Feodora provided emotional support and served as a connection to Victoria's childhood at Kensington. Victoria also took an interest in Feodora's children, particularly Victor, who served in the Royal Navy. The relationship demonstrated the personal bonds that persisted across the formal structures of royal and noble life. Feodora's health declined in the early 1870s. She died on September 23, 1872, at Baden-Baden, a spa town where she had gone for treatment. She was 64 years old. Queen Victoria was deeply affected by her sister's death and wrote movingly about her loss. Victoria described Feodora as having been a loving presence throughout her life and mourned the passing of one of the few people who had known her from childhood. Feodora was buried in the family vault at Langenburg. Her legacy is primarily genealogical and personal rather than political. She served as the link between the Leiningen family and the Hohenlohe-Langenburg line. and through her children and grandchildren, she became an ancestor of numerous European royal families. Her great-granddaughter, Augusta Victoria's position as German Empress made Feodora a direct ancestor of the last generation of German imperial royalty. Her relationship with Queen Victoria also forms part of her legacy. As Victoria's childhood companion and lifelong correspondent, Feodora occupied a unique position in the Queen's personal life. She represented continuity with Victoria's early years and provided emotional support across decades. Through her descendants, Feodora's line remains part of the complex network of European royal genealogy, connecting the minor German nobility of the early 19th century to the major royal houses of the late 19th and 20th centuries. Alexandrina Victoria was born on May 24, 1819, at Kensington Palace in London. Her birth was the direct result of the succession crisis facing the British royal family. King George III's sons had produced few legitimate heirs, and by 1818 the succession was uncertain. The Duke of Kent, Victoria's father, married Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld specifically to produce an heir to the throne. Victoria's birth achieved this purpose. She was fifth in line to the throne at birth. Her names reflected her dual heritage. Alexandrina honored her godfather, Tsar Alexander I of Russia. Victoria was her mother's name. The Archbishop of Canterbury baptized her at Kensington Palace in June 1819, with members of the royal family in attendance. Her position in the succession was immediately significant, though it was not yet certain she would actually inherit the crown. Her birth marked the beginning of a life defined by royal expectation and political importance. The Duke of Kent died on January 23, 1820, when Victoria was only 8 months old. His death from pneumonia meant that Victoria never knew her father and grew up in a household headed entirely by women. The Duchess of Kent became responsible for raising Victoria, managing their residence at Kensington Palace, and navigating the complex political situation surrounding her daughter's position in the royal succession. The household consisted of the Duchess, Victoria, Feodora, and their attendants. Sir John Conroy, the Duchess's comptroller, played an increasingly significant role in managing household affairs and advising the Duchess. The absence of a male royal authority figure shaped the household's dynamics and contributed to Victoria's isolation from the broader royal family. King George IV and later King William IV maintained distant and sometimes hostile relations with the Duchess, creating a divided royal family structure. The Duchess of Kent, advised by Sir John Conroy, implemented a structured approach to Victoria's upbringing that became known as the Kensington system. This system aimed to control every aspect of Victoria's life, ostensibly to protect her health and moral development. Victoria was never left alone. She slept in her mother's room, was accompanied constantly by attendants, and had limited contact with people outside the immediate household. The system included detailed rules about diet, exercise, sleep, and education. Victoria followed a strict daily schedule of lessons, walks, and supervised activities. She was not allowed to walk downstairs alone, a precaution supposedly for safety. The system also limited her exposure to her royal uncles and the broader court. The Duchess presented this as protective, but it also served to increase the Duchess's control over Victoria and, potentially, over a future queen. Victoria herself later described the Kensington system negatively. She felt isolated and controlled, with little freedom or independence. The system created tension in her relationship with her mother and contributed to her determination to assert her own authority when she became queen. It shaped her character by creating a strong desire for independence and a skepticism toward those who claimed to act in her best interests. Despite the restrictions of the Kensington system, Victoria received a comprehensive education designed to prepare her for potential queenship. She studied with private tutors under the supervision of the Duchess and Baroness Lehzen, her governess. Her curriculum included languages. She became fluent in English and German and learned French and Italian. She studied history, particularly British constitutional history, geography, and religion. Victoria also received instruction in music and drawing, accomplishments expected of royal women. She showed talent in both areas, particularly in sketching and watercolors. Her religious education emphasized Anglican principles and moral development. The education was systematic and thorough, reflecting the possibility that she would inherit the throne and need preparation for that role. The Duchess also arranged periodic tours around England to increase Victoria's visibility and public recognition. These royal progresses introduced the young princess to different regions of the country and allowed the public to see the potential future queen. The tours were carefully managed but served to build Victoria's public profile and demonstrate her growing readiness for royal responsibilities. Victoria gradually became aware of her position in the line of succession during her childhood. The exact moment of this realization has been dramatized in various accounts, but the essential fact is that by her early teenage years, Victoria fully understood that she would likely become queen. King William IV had no surviving legitimate children, and the heirs before Victoria in the succession died or remained childless. This realization brought both burden and purpose to Victoria's adolescence. She understood that her education and upbringing were preparation for queenship. She also recognized that her mother and Sir John Conroy were positioning themselves to exercise influence over her reign. Victoria began to assert her own will more forcefully, resisting attempts by Conroy to gain her confidence and maintaining her own counsel with the support of Baroness Lehzen. The knowledge that she would likely inherit the throne at a young age created psychological pressure. Victoria would later recall feeling the weight of expectation and the isolation of her position. She had few friends her own age and limited opportunities for normal social interaction. Her awareness of her future role contributed to her determination to exercise independent judgment when the time came. King William IV died in the early morning of June 20th, 1837. Victoria was informed at Kensington Palace and immediately understood that she was now queen. She was 18 years old, just past the age of majority, which meant no regency would be necessary. Her first acts as queen demonstrated her determination to exercise independent authority. She requested a private meeting with Lord Melbourne, the Prime Minister, without her mother present, a clear signal that she would not be controlled by the Duchess or Sir John Conroy. Victoria's accession was constitutionally straightforward but personally transformative. She moved from being a controlled and isolated princess to being a monarch with full constitutional authority. She immediately began reshaping her household and her living arrangements. She ordered that her bed be moved to her own room. The first time she had slept alone since childhood, she distanced herself from Sir John Conroy and reduced her mother's role in her daily life. Her early decisions established the pattern of her reign. She worked closely with Lord Melbourne, who served as both Prime Minister and mentor during her first years as Queen. She attended to state business diligently, reading dispatches and conducting audiences. She was crowned at Westminster Abbey on June 28, 1838, in a ceremony that emphasized continuity with British monarchical tradition and her own legitimate authority as Queen. Victoria's early reign focused on establishing her authority as an independent monarch. She reorganized the royal household, removing individuals associated with the Kensington system and appointing her own staff. She insisted on making her own decisions about court appointments and ceremonial matters. Her relationship with her mother became strained. The Duchess was moved to separate apartments and excluded from political discussions. Victoria worked to master the constitutional responsibilities of the monarchy. She met regularly with her ministers, particularly Lord Melbourne, and developed her understanding of parliamentary government. She took her role seriously, reading state papers and attending to correspondence. She also began to navigate the social expectations of queenship, including court presentations, state dinners, and public appearances. Her determination to exercise independent judgment sometimes created political difficulties. The bedchamber crisis of 1839, when Victoria refused to dismiss her Whig ladies-in-waiting at the request of a potential Tory government, demonstrated both her strong will and her political inexperience. She learned from such episodes and gradually developed a more sophisticated understanding of her constitutional position. Victoria married her first cousin, Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, on February 10, 1840, at the Chapel Royal in St. James's Palace. The marriage had been encouraged by her uncle, King Leopold of the Belgians, and her mother as part of Coburg dynastic strategy. Victoria and Albert had met previously, and Victoria fell deeply in love with him. As queen, she had to propose to him, which she did in October 1839. The marriage significantly affected Victoria's reign and personal life. Albert gradually assumed an increasingly important role as her advisor and partner in royal responsibilities. Initially, he had no formal constitutional role, but Victoria came to rely on his judgment and political acumen. He helped reorganize the royal household, improve the management of royal estates, and advised Victoria on political matters. Their partnership evolved over the first years of marriage. Albert's influence grew as Victoria recognized his capabilities and trusted his advice. He effectively became her private secretary and closest political counselor. Their marriage combined genuine emotional attachment with political partnership. Albert's death in 1861 would devastate Victoria and fundamentally alter the character of her later reign. Victoria and Albert had 9 children between 1840 and 1857, creating a substantial royal family that would spread across Europe through strategic marriages. Their children were Victoria, Princess Royal, born in 1840, who married Crown Prince Friedrich of Prussia, becoming German Empress and mother of Kaiser Wilhelm II. Edward, Prince of Wales, born in 1841, who became King Edward VII and married Princess Alexandra of Denmark. Alice, born in 1843, who married Grand Duke Ludwig IV of Hesse, connecting the family to Russian and Greek royalty through her descendants. Alfred, Duke of Edinburgh, born in 1844, who married Grand Duchess Maria Alexandrovna of Russia. Helena, born in 1846, who married Prince Christian of Schleswig-Holstein. Louise, born in 1848, who married John Campbell, Marquess of Lorne, later Duke of Argyll. Arthur, Duke of Connaught, born in 1850, who married Princess Louise Margaret of Prussia. Leopold, Duke of Albany, born in 1853, who married Princess Helena of Waldeck and Pyrmont, and carried hemophilia, which he passed to some descendants. Beatrice, born in 1857, who married Prince Henry of Battenberg and remained her mother's companion. Through these marriages, Victoria's descendants entered the royal houses of Germany, Russia, Greece, Romania, Spain, Sweden, Norway, and Denmark. Her strategy of marrying her children into European dynasties earned her the title Grandmother of Europe. By the early 20th century, Victoria's grandchildren occupied or were married into most of Europe's thrones. This genealogical spread had both political and genetic consequences. The political alliances it created did not prevent World War I, when Victoria's grandchildren found themselves on opposing sides, and the spread of hemophilia through her descendants affected several royal lines. Victoria's relationship with her mother gradually improved after her marriage. Initially, the relationship had been strained by the tensions created by the Kensington system and Victoria's determination to assert independence. The Duchess of Kent remained at court, but was excluded from political influence and maintained separate apartments, over time particularly. After Victoria's children were born, the relationship became warmer. The Duchess took an interest in her grandchildren, and Victoria began to appreciate her mother's position more sympathetically. Albert helped facilitate reconciliation between mother and daughter. The Duchess's role became more purely familial and less politically fraught, as Victoria's own authority became secure. When the Duchess of Kent died on March 16, 1861, Victoria was deeply grieved. She discovered papers revealing that her mother had been manipulated by Sir John Conroy and realized that some of the tensions of her childhood had not been entirely her mother's fault. Victoria's grief was genuine and profound, and she mourned her mother intensely. The Duchess's death, followed by Albert's death 9 months later, marked the end of Victoria's early adult life and the beginning of her long period of mourning and withdrawal. Victoria's reign continued for 40 more years after Albert's death. She withdrew from public life during the 1860s, mourning deeply and conducting royal business from Windsor and her other residences rather than from London. Public criticism of her absence from ceremonial duties grew during this period. She gradually returned to more active public participation in the 1870s and 1880s. Her Golden Jubilee in 1887 and Diamond Jubilee in 1897 became major celebrations of her reign and the British Empire. These events emphasized Britain's global power and Victoria's symbolic role as Empress. She had been declared Empress of India in 1876, adding an imperial title to her British crown. By the end of her reign, she presided over the largest empire in world history. Victoria died on January 22, 1901, at Osborne House on the Isle of Wight. She was 81 years old and had reigned for 63 years. the longest reign in British history to that point. She was surrounded by family members, including her eldest grandson, Kaiser Wilhelm II. She was buried beside Albert at Frogmore Mausoleum in Windsor. Victoria's legacy is multifaceted. She gave her name to an entire era, the Victorian Age, which saw dramatic changes in British society, technology, and global power. She redefined the British monarchy, transforming it from an institution facing serious Republican challenges in the early 19th century to a symbol of national unity and imperial power. Her constitutional role evolved toward the modern pattern of ceremonial monarchy with political neutrality. Her genealogical legacy is equally significant. She is the direct ancestor of the current British royal family through her son, Edward VII. She is also an ancestor of the royal families of Spain, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and the former royal houses of Germany, Russia, Greece, and Romania. Her descendants include Queen Elizabeth II, Queen Sophia of Spain, King Carl XVI, Gustav of Sweden, and Queen Margrethe II of Denmark, among many others. As the youngest child of Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, Alexandrina Victoria carried her mother's legacy further than either of her siblings. She transformed a small German princess's lineage into the most widespread royal descent line in modern European history. Her life demonstrated how the succession patterns of the early 19th century could elevate a minor German connection into global historical significance. She remains the most consequential of Princess Victoria's 3 children and one of the most influential monarchs in modern history. Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld's 3 children followed remarkably different paths, each reflecting a different aspect of European aristocratic and royal life in the 19th century. Karl remained in Germany, inheriting a small principality and participating in the failed revolutionary politics of 1848. Feodora married into the mediatized German nobility and became the matriarch of a line that spread through European royal families. Victoria became Queen of the United Kingdom and Empress of India, reshaping the British monarchy and creating a dynastic network that spanned continents. Together, these 3 siblings demonstrate how a minor German princess became the matriarch of a dynasty that shaped 19th and 20th century Europe. Through Karl's descendants, the lining in line continued. Through Feodora's marriage, connections spread to the Hohenlohe-Langenburg family and beyond. Through Victoria's 9 children, the lineage reached nearly every major European throne. The children of Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld lived through revolution, empire, and profound political change, each contributing to the complex tapestry of European royal genealogy that defines the continent's aristocratic heritage today.